BoneLab. It's been exactly 1 year since BoneLab's release, and to say the least, it was not what we expected. BoneLab was supposed to be a successor to the very popular and well-known game in the VR community known as Boneworks. Boneworks was an FPS physics-based story game published by Stress Level Zero. Unlike BoneLab, Boneworks was a very enjoyable game with a rich story and deep lore connecting itself to other Stress Level Zero games such as Duck Season and Hover Junkers. Boneworks was and still is one of the best VR games to exist. It shows what VR can truly do beyond the boundaries of dumb little games like Job Simulator and Rec Room. I'm just going to talk about Boneworks for a little bit. How about that? The guns felt the same as real life with an amazing sound design, reload, and recoil. It was pretty close to perfect. The physics made sense and actually worked. It was a little bit janky to be honest, but it was good. Objects felt heavy, they were actually accurate to their real weight. Big weapons like maces and swords felt real, and like you could actually do some damage with them. Small weapons like hatchets and daggers felt quick and strong. For example, you can get very creative just using the physics. Imagine you're in the streets of a dystopian city. You're approached by a nobody, which if you don't know, is the main enemy of Boneworks and BoneLab. You could grab a trash can, put it on its head, you could throw it into the trash can, you could throw it against a wall, you could grab a gun and shoot the nobody, you could do anything. There's infinite ways. But BoneLab couldn't complete that. Boneworks was luckily gifted with the ability of creativity. There was no wrong solutions, but BoneLab was just stuck up in a way. There was hardly any creativity involved. The only special thing you could do was change your avatar, which even in itself was a disappointment. The characters were bland and basic. You could only have 7 characters on your body log, but even worse, the moment you get the body log, which was the main feature of the game, you'll find out that the game ends in 3 more levels. I accidentally read it wrong. But BoneLab cannot complete that. Wait, no. Boneworks was gifted with the ability of creativity. There was no wrong solutions, but BoneLab was just stuck up in a way. There was hardly any creativity involved. The only special thing you could do was change your avatar, which in itself was a disappointment. The characters were bland and basic. You could only have 7 characters on your body log, but even worse, the moment you got the body log, which is the main feature of the game, you find out that the game ends in 3 more levels. So you get the most important and fun part of the game at the end instead of the beginning where it should have been. Imagine, you could have gone anywhere, solved as many puzzles as you want with that little feature. But no, it was at the end of the game instead of at the beginning where it belonged. Another dumb thing was the fact on how short the game was. It was only 14 levels, which I know sounds like a lot, but half of them were just unlocking avatars. And the avatar levels were literally mini-games. Literal mini-games. So 50% of the game was mini-games. 50%. So 50% of the entire campaign was mini-games. But surprise, surprise, the game is even worse. The story made barely any sense as the only thing that could explain anything were the freaking radios and clipboards. Nothing made sense. It was a jumbled mess. Boneworks was a great game. The story made sense, the gameplay was good, and so were the physics, but BoneLab was a janky, boring physics worse than the last game, even though we were told it would be an improvement over the last. And overall, straight up unfinished. No joke, the beginning and end were the only 2 good parts of the game, because they were the only 2 parts that weren't full of minigames, when that's all the middle was, minigames. It honestly disappoints me so much that BoneLab had so much potential, but lost it all because of a few little mistakes. The game was a disaster to say the least. Also, may I add, the fact that Boneworks' objects felt real and heavy, but so did the guns. The recoil was perfect. That's a hard thing to do. But here comes BoneLab ready to screw it up with his new dumb and improved, well, quote-unquote improved, Marrow physics engine. Anyways, the physics were floaty and janky, just straight up broken. But they screwed up the guns the most. The Eder 22 had no recoil despite being a 9mm pistol. Oh. but they screwed up the guns the most. For example, the Eder 22 has no recoil, despite being a 9mm pistol, which, for those of you who don't know, 9mm still have pretty big amounts of recoil. Another example is the 1911, which is loaded with 45 ACP, which has recoil like nothing else. Okay, let's do a little bit of a comparison here, just to show you kind of what bad recoil and gun reloading looks like, and then good. So, here's Onward. Contractors. See the difference? Onward is just awkward and floaty, whilst Contractors is damn well near perfect. Now, to give BoneLab some credit here, they did a pretty good job with the reloading, but the recoil on the guns was just absolutely nothing. But that's really just the weapons. Now let's talk about the story. So to start, here's Boneworks' story. Boneworks is based in the 1990s, where a company by the name of Gammon discovers a new strange dimension known as the Voidway, which goes beyond space and time. But they're not the first people to find it. The first people to find it is this company named Gammon, but that's unimportant to the story. Let's go to the good part. The main character, Arthur Ford, works at Monaco, but he betrays the company by working with Gammon. He plugs a Gammon hard drive into the Monagon servers, thus booting down all of the servers and kicking everyone out. But only Ford could enter, so he does. He enters MythOS and his mission is to gain eternal life in the void. Anyways, he goes through MythOS and encounters problems, and people manage to contact him through MythOS via televisions. And on one of those videos, someone finds the Gammon hard drive that he had plugged into the Monagon servers. But Ford still has to continue his mission. He resets the clock tower, which allows everyone to go back into MythOS and gets rid of the time freeze. But before you know it, he opens up the void and jumps in it, which makes his mission successful. After he goes into the void, the real-life version of himself is killed by Monagon, but he still exists in the void. And BoneLab's story is very simple, and it's not even close to as good as Boneworks was. When you are getting sentenced to death by the people of Fantasyland, a knife appears in front of you to cut yourself free of the noose that's going to hang you. You descend into the catacombs when all of a sudden you take an elevator that crashes and takes you down into the BoneLab. In the BoneLab, you'll do various things such as mini-games, storyline completion, and much more. The first part of the story, you are taken to about 3 levels that add nothing to the story. Then you proceed to a bunch of mini-games, which again adds nothing to the story. Then you are sent to the Boneworks crate, which has nothing to do with Boneworks, and those last few levels, guess what, also add nothing to the story. BoneLab added nothing to the lore. Literally nothing. It had nothing to say. The only thing it added was this character Jimmy Wong. BoneLab was literally just a gateway to that character. Yet, we don't know how important he is, so this could be a good thing that this happened. But the game was still a disappointment. I mean, the game had no context. I mean, probably as little context as this.
Number 19, Mouse in Baked Beans.
Anyways, I know BoneLab was supposed to be mainly just a sandbox game. And it did okay at that, to say the least, but it just wasn't as good as Boneworks, you know, just in general. Even when it comes to sandbox, I mean, yeah, they improved the melee combat by a lot. I can't agree on that. They did do that, so good job on them for improving the melee combat. But everything else was just dry as bones. Like, I barely found myself having fun in this game. And honestly, you can see that they ran out of ideas. Because towards the end of the game, well, not towards the end of the game, but when you get into the BoneLab, there's literally a parkour section. A parkour section in a physics game, because that's going to go great. It doesn't run fluently at all. Nothing in this game does. I mean, yeah, Sandbox was alright, which I know was its main purpose, but I feel like Boneworks was better because you actually had to go out and find those maps. You didn't just get them for free, like you did in BoneLab. But in reality, BoneLab was not the absolutely amazing game we all hoped for. It was more like an experiment to see if Stress Level 0 could actually pull off this stunt on the Quest 2. I mean, the game was supposed to be big, you know, 1 in a million.
There's only one of me in all the world. I am 1 in a trillion.
But in the end, we had to chase content down like this guy. My honest conclusion is that BoneLab was a more degraded version of Boneworks. I was expecting BoneLab to be dark and mysterious, not whatever stale game we actually got. BoneLab is a disappointment, not only to the Boneworks fans, but also to the whole VR community. We all truly looked forward to this game, but even after a year, it's still the sad old game it used to be.